The Ents and Entwives lived together in relative harmony for quite a few years. But eventually the Entwives wished to go somewhere else as their desires were different. We've talked about how the Ents are shepherds. Think about what that looks like. You have a bunch of honestly willfully stupid animals running around that you have to keep track of and make sure they're all going in the same direction. It's kind of chaos, controlled chaos anyway. The Entwives wished for... Hello everybody, welcome to Are The Entwives, where we are walking our way through Tolkien's Legendarium, looking for new insights and a greater understanding of the works we all love. Today we are continuing through chapter 4 of book 3, Treebeard. As we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, grab a version of the books you don't have from the description below, or join the channel membership community if you'd like to support the channel that way. Also, we do partner with Chapters Tea and Coffee. Chapters spring from a passion for story. They set out to elevate the stories we all love by teaming up with independent artists to hand draw beautiful imagery and pair it with specially selected artisanal tea. My favorite is Second Breakfast, of course. Go to drinkchapters.com/Huron and use code Huron15 to get 15% off. I do earn a small commission from every bag sold, so of course, thank you in advance. It's a great way to sit down and enjoy the books we all love. That's drinkchapters.com/Huron and use code Huron15 to get 15% off. All right, let's dive in. We left off with Treebeard giving his sentiment that he hopes the new people, the hobbits, weather the storm that's coming. I noted that it feels really like he's drawing like a line in the sand. He's doing his thing and the storm is coming for everyone else. And here is where we pick back up. And what about yourself? Asked Merry. I have not troubled about the great wars, said Treebeard. They mostly concern elves and men. That is the business of wizards. Wizards are always troubled about the future. I do not like worrying about the future. I'm not altogether on anybody's side because nobody is altogether on my side, if you understand me. Nobody cares for the wood as I care for them, not even elves nowadays. Still, I take more kindly to elves than to others. It was the elves that cured us of dumbness long ago, and that was a great gift that cannot be forgotten, though our ways have parted since. And there are some things, of course, whose side I am altogether not on. I am against them altogether, these Baruarum. He again made a deep rumble of disgust. These orcs and their masters. We do see Treebeard here setting himself aside from the goings-on around him. He doesn't trouble with the Great Wars. They're for everybody else. And I mean, he's not entirely wrong. He was alive through the reign of Morgoth on Middle-earth. He survived the War of Wrath that sank Beleriand. He was fine through the Second Age when Sauron reigned and destroyed Eregion and essentially ruled everything east of the Misty Mountains. Sure, he's had some loss, but that happens. It really, it's just collateral damage. Those wars only really affect men and elves. And he even puts another thought out there about the elves fading. Did you catch it? He said the elves don't even care about the woods the same way anymore. Now, this sentiment really seems to be a product of his other writings. Everything that ended up in the Silmarillion. The elves really are fading, even though readers of only the Lord of the Rings won't really understand why. The longer they are in Middle-earth, the more they fade. Eventually their Hroa give up and their Fea will then wander, body and then spirit, which is honestly a really amazing thing for him to be doing, for Tolkien to be doing. He was world building before world building was like a term. Though he didn't do it like with the end in mind. He just needed to do his sub-creation. It's basically like, it's kind of like a little Easter egg. He just keeps putting in the book, and I stinking love it. Of course, the one thing Treebeard does take a stand on and even says he's against are the orcs and their masters. And him saying he is against them is the first pebbles caused by Merry and Pippin to start going downhill. The avalanche that will develop over the next couple of pages. But of course, like any good tree, Treebeard must weather the storm, bend with it or crack. But Saruman now. Saruman is a neighbor. I cannot overlook him. I must do something. I suppose I have often wondered lately what I should do about Saruman. This goes back to what I said a video or two ago. The Ents are shepherds. Their purpose in their life is to protect their flock. In this case, the trees. And I don't think that shepherds were historically very involved in wars and politics unless, drafted into it. Things could happen outside of where they needed to be, and it wasn't a big deal as long as their flock wasn't getting hurt. But that is exactly what we're seeing here. The trees that Treebeard was put here to protect are in danger from someone close. It's not far away wars anymore. It's a neighbor. And I've always loved these few pages because it's a lot of Treebeard talking and giving us kind of an info dump, like the Council of Elrond. And the information just really keeps coming. Pippin asks who Saruman is. Saruman is a wizard, answered Treebeard. More than that I cannot say. I do not know the history of wizards. They appeared first after the great ships came over the sea. But if they came with the ships, I never can tell. Saruman was reckoned great among them, I believe. He gave up wandering about and minding the affairs of elves and men some time ago. You would call it a very long time ago. And he settled down at Angrenost, or Isengard as the men of Rohan call it. There was a time when he was always walking about my woods. He was polite in those days, always asking my leave, at least when he met me, and always eager to listen. I told him many things that he would never have found out by himself. But he never repaid me in like kind. I cannot remember that he ever told me anything. And he got more and more like that. His face, as I remember it, I have not seen it for many a day, became like windows in the stone wall. Windows with shutters inside. I think that I now understand what he is up to. He is plotting to become a power. He has a mind of metal and wheels, and he does not care for growing things except as far as they serve him for the moment. And now it is clear that he is a black traitor. He is taken up with foul folk, with the orcs. Brum, boom. Worse than that, he has been doing something to them, something dangerous. For these Isengarders are more like wicked men. It is a mark of evil things that came in the great darkness that they cannot abide the sun. But Saruman's orcs can endure it, even if they hate it. I wonder what he has done. Are they men he has ruined, or has he blended the race of orcs and men? That would be a black evil. All right, so there's a lot here. Let's start with the wizards. Appendix B in the Lord of the Rings gives us some information about who the wizards truly are. When maybe 1,000 years had passed and the first shadow had fallen on Greenwood the Great, the Istari, or wizards, appeared in Middle-earth. It was afterwards said that they came out of the far west and were messengers sent to contest the power of Sauron and to unite all those who had the will to resist him. But they were forbidden to match his power with power, or to seek to dominate elves or men by force and fear. Unfinished Tales has a whole chapter on them. In it, we find the Istari arrived in about the year 1000 of the Third Age. For a long time, Círdan the Shipwright was the only one who knew they came from Valinor by boat, sent by the Valar with the consent of Eru. The super interesting part is the Valar sent the Istari and forbid them to reveal themselves in forms of majesty, or to seek to rule the wills of men or elves by open display of power, but coming in shapes weak and humble, were bidden to advise and persuade men and elves to good. So that part we've talked about before, but what I never really mentioned and essentially never realized, they were forbidden to use power like that because the Valar were trying to correct their error when they first brought the elves to Valinor. They tried to keep the elves in Valinor with their might and glory revealed. It clearly didn't work, so they're trying a different tack this time. The last little note the Unfinished Tales gives us is it says their number is unknown, but there were 5 that came to the north. Appendix B doesn't go so far as to say we don't know how many, but it does say 5, so it's possible they're actually just a bunch of Istari running around, and they just weren't in the right place to have as large, an effect as Gandalf did. But the whole point for them to fight against Sauron and to help those who were opposed to him. If we weren't aware of it from Gandalf's story in the Council of Elrond, Treebeard is giving us some more insight. Saruman used to be interested in what was happening in the forest and what Treebeard could tell him until he closed himself off. And the result of closing himself off was Treebeard realizing Saruman had a mind of metal and wheels, and he doesn't care for growing things. And this is telling because Treebeard doesn't outright say Saruman has become evil. He just says he doesn't care for growing things anymore. It's not even about good versus evil in Treebeard's mind. It's Saruman going against his own purpose. He's harming things Treebeard is there to protect. And his evils just keep going. We talked a few videos ago about orcs and how they possibly came to be, whether corrupted elves or something else. You can check that one out over here. In that conversation, it was mentioned that Morgoth doing his work and creating orcs was a great evil. It's one of the options. And Treebeard echoes that here. He doesn't really know how Saruman is doing it, but it seems like he's crossbreeding humans and orcs and creating these Uruk-hai like Luke. And this is the first exclamation we get from Treebeard. It's the next few larger stones starting down the hill. And then we really see it starting. Curse him, root and branch. Many of those trees were my friends, creatures I had known from nut and acorn. Many had voices of their own that are lost forever now. And there are wastes of stump and bramble where once there were singing groves. I have been idle, I have let things slip. It must stop. Treebeard raised himself from his bed with a jerk, stood up and thumped his hand on the table. The vessels of light trembled and sent up 2 jets of flame. There was a flicker like green fire in his eyes, and his beard stood out stiff as a great besom. I will stop it, he boomed, and you shall come with me. You may be able to help me. You will be helping your own friends that way too. For if Saruman is not checked, Rohan and Gondor will have an enemy behind as well as in front. Our roads go together to Isengard. Woo! All right, so that actually gives me goosebumps. Treebeard is getting right hasty here. The story from the Hobbits has like forced him to come to terms with what Saruman is being a big jerk, and anger at being tricked and used. It's all finally bubbling to the surface. We're seeing actual anger come out here. And I just love that the bowls used for the light shoot up jets of flame. I don't think there's any particular importance to it necessarily, but it seems like it's another instance of magic coming from a fantastical creature without them actually trying to do magic. It's just so innate with these peoples, elves, whatever, that it just comes out when they hit a table. As a side note, it's crazy how much I love the magic in Tolkien because it's a relatively soft magic system. And overall, I tend to gravitate towards harder magic systems like Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere or Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. But I digress, back to the actual story. After his outburst, we have Treebeard's favorite phrase, don't be hasty. He realizes he needs a quick timeout, stands under the falling spring, which Tolkien notes is like rain, and comes back to lie down and think things over some more. Another side note, that's probably something we should all do every once in a while. Go touch some grass, stand in the rain, probably do us all some good. Anyway, the hobbits overhear Treebeard talking, and they get a small lesson in Ents. Only 3 of the original Ents remain, and that number includes Treebeard. One of them has grown tree-ish, and essentially just sits there and the other is hiding in a safe area away from the destruction that was sent on his herd. There are some younger Ents, but Treebeard laments how few of them there are. This prompts, honestly, a decent question from Pippin. Why are there so few when you have lived in this country so long? Asked Pippin. Have a great many died? Oh no, said Treebeard. None have died from inside, as you might say. Some have fallen in the evil chances of the long years, of course, and many have grown tree-ish. But there were never many of us, and we have not increased. There have been no entings, no children, you would say, not for a terrible long count of years. You see, we lost the Entwives. How very sad, said Pippin. How was it that they all died? They did not die, said Treebeard. I never said died, we lost them, I said. We lost them and we cannot find them. He sighed. I thought most folk knew that. There were songs about the hunt of the Ents for the Entwives sung among elves and men from Mirkwood to Gondor. They cannot be quite forgotten. So we come to it. Entwives. Honestly, it seems pretty self-explanatory. They're female Ents. But why are they lost? Well, Treebeard takes us on a relatively long journey of the story, but I'll shorten it for us here, though I suggest you take a few minutes, read it, so you can make sure I'm not screwing anything up. The Ents and Entwives lived together in relative harmony for quite a few years, but eventually the Entwives wished to go somewhere else as their desires were different. We've talked about how the Ents are shepherds. Think about what that looks like. You have a bunch of, honestly, willfully stupid animals running around that you have to keep track of and make sure they're all going in the same direction. It's kind of chaos, controlled chaos anyway. The Entwives wished for order and less of a herd, and they saw the sloe in the thicket and the wild apple and the cherry blossoming in spring, and the green herbs in the waterlands in summer, and the seeding grasses in the autumn fields. They did not desire to speak with these things, but they wished them to hear and obey what was said to them. The Entwives ordered them to grow according to their wishes, bear leaf and fruit to their liking. For the Entwives desired order and plenty and peace, by which they meant that things should remain where they had set them. Now, we don't get anything specific about where the Entwives like to put their orchards and meadows, but Treebeard shortly tells us the Entwives moved across the Anduin once the darkness came in the north. That's when they moved to what is now the Brown Lands. I think you can see it over my shoulder on the screen over here-ish, something. Then the darkness was defeated and their land flourished, and many people learned from them. Now, that darkness from the north, I believe, is Morgoth. Then he was overthrown, so they had peace for a really long time. Then Sauron came, and the last alliance of elves and men came. Treebeard says, all the gardens of the Entwives are wasted. Men call them the Brown Lands now. And we crossed over Anduin and came to their land. But we found a desert, which was all burned and uprooted, for war had passed over it. But the Entwives were not there. And in letter 144 to Naomi Mitchison, Tolkien states, I think that in fact the Entwives have disappeared for good, being destroyed with their gardens in the War of the Last Alliance, Second Age 3429 to 3441, when Sauron pursued a scorched earth policy and burned their land against the advance of the allies down the Anduin. So here we are. As Sauron was driven back to Mordor by Gil-galad and Elendil's forces, he burned everything around him, trying to make it impossible for the elves' men to march against him. And in that, the Entwives were destroyed, never seen again. But what makes it even more sad than just the normal sadness of something being gone forever is how Treebeard speaks of his memory of them as he went to search for them. Very fair she was still in my eyes, when I had last seen her, though little like the Ent maiden of old. For the Entwives were bent and browned by their labor, their hair parched by the sun to the hue of ripe corn, and their cheeks like red apples. Yet their eyes were still the eyes of our own people. Isn't that just a punch in the gut? He remembered his time with Fimbrethil fondly and knew who she truly was. And we saw Pippin struggle to describe the eyes of Treebeard, so we got a little bit of a small idea how distinct Ent eyes are. And Fimbrethil's were still the eyes of their people. Her outward appearance may have changed, but they were still tied together by the eyes. They were still the same person, but now they're gone. We then get a poem from Treebeard that the elves made. I'll read 2 stanzas, but I suggest you listen to Tolkien himself read the poem in this video. He does it, I don't know, let's just say a bit more justice than I ever could. Ent. When spring unfolds the beechen leaf and sap is in the bough, when light is on the wildwood stream and wind is in the brow, when stride is long and breath is deep and keen the mountain air, come back to me and say my land is fair. Entwife. When spring is come to garth and field and corn is in the blade, when blossom like as shining snow is on the orchard laid, when shower and sun upon the earth with fragrance fill the air, I'll linger here and will not come because my land is fair. A couple things I want to mention about this beautiful song. First is the meter. I don't actually 100% know. You can kind of do a loose iambic tetrameter or a more like strict iambic heptameter. And here's my interpretation of the tetrameter. When spring unfolds the beechen leaf and sap is in the bough. It's a little loose, like there isn't a single syllable stressed and unstressed. It's in the bough. But it does work. And here's kind of my interpretation of the heptameter. When spring unfolds the beechen leaf and sap is in the bough. It's more strict as each syllable is stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed. Listening to Tolkien read it, I'm more likely to call it tetrameter, but hopefully you can kind of see my difficulty here. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. The other thing I want to talk about is the rhyming scheme. I'm going to put a little chart here, maybe here-ish, so you can see what I'm talking about. It's really interesting to me how Tolkien does this rhyming scheme. The first 2 lines in each stanza rhyme and the second 2 lines rhyme, so A, A, B, B. In the next stanza, the first 2 lines rhyme with the other, so like a C, C, and the second set of lines rhyme with each other. Not only do they rhyme with each other, they rhyme with the second set of lines in the first stanza, so B, B. So be A, A, B, B, C, C, B, B. Even more than that, they're the same words. So stanzas 1 and 2 have the same second set of lines. Stanzas 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. 5 and 6 have the same words, but they're actually switched. And when you look at them, they're counterpoints to each other. The Ents are begging the Entwives to say their land is best, while the Entwives are making the statement that their land is best. Request and then statement. I've never noticed that before. Every time I tell you, I'm learning something different when I sit down to write a script. It's awesome. Okay, so moving forward a bit, they all go to sleep. And when the hobbits wake up, Treebeard has already been walking around visiting with other Ents for quite a while and tells them it's time to go to Entmoot. Hammond and Skull let us know via the OED that a moot is an assembly held for debate especially in Anglo-Saxon and medieval times. So it's an assembly of Ents. You may have heard different parts of the Tolkien fandom using the word moot. Oxenmoot is in Oxford each year by the Tolkien Society, the Prancing Pony Moot, held by the Prancing Pony Podcast, and Signum's Myth Moot, and other regional moots are held around the world. They're just places for Tolkien fans to gather and essentially nerd out together, or assemble. But that's not exactly what the Ents will be doing in their moot, but we'll get to that. So Treebeard picks up the hobbits, literally picks them up, and he walks and walks. Eventually, he sets the hobbits down and blows a call through his hands. A great hum rang out like a deep-throated horn in the woods and seemed to echo from the trees. Far off, there came from several directions a similar hum that was not an echo but an answer. Treebeard now perched Merry and Pippin on his shoulders and strode on again, every now and then sending out another horn call, and each time he answers came louder and nearer. In this way, they came at last to what looked like an impenetrable wall of dark evergreen trees of a kind that the hobbits had never seen before. They branched out right from the roots and were densely clad in dark, glossy leaves like thornless holly, and they bore many stiff, upright flower spikes with large, shining, olive-colored buds. They have now arrived at Durndingle, where the Entmoot will be held. Hamlin and Skull point out the word is made up of two bases, Durn and Dingle. Surprise. Dingle being a deep tree-shadowed dell, so the description a minute ago makes perfect sense. Durn is a root we'll see later in Durnhelm. It's a bit more archaic and obsolete term, but it means like secret or hidden. So it's a secret dell shadowed by trees. Not quite as mysterious, maybe, as I thought when I first read it, but there we are. Now we get to the last reading for today's video as the hobbits arrived at the moot. Several Ents had already arrived. More were coming in down the other paths, and some were now following Treebeard. As they drew near, the hobbits gazed at them. They had expected to see a number of creatures as much like Treebeard as one hobbit is like another, at any rate to a stranger's eye, and they were very much surprised to see nothing of the kind. The Ents were as different from one another as trees from trees, some as different as one tree is from another of the same name but quite different growth and history, and some as different as one tree kind from another, as birch from beech, oak from fir. There were a few older Ents, bearded and gnarled like hale but ancient trees, though none looked as ancient as Treebeard. And there were tall, strong Ents, clean-limbed and smooth-skinned like forest trees in their prime. But there were no young Ents, no saplings. Altogether, there were about 24 standing on the wide, grassy floor of the dingle, and as many more were marching in. So the hobbits get their first look at other Ents, and they look like trees. Surprise. But not just any like generic tree, they're all different, even more different than they would have thought. They understand that hobbits, can look similar to each other, to the, let's say unpracticed eye, but we can probably say the differences here are stark. Though Tolkien may be overestimating how much some of the readers know about trees, but that's okay. And more are marching in as the hobbits are watching. But what are they getting ready to talk about? Well, that we will get to in the next video. So thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, buy a new version of the book you don't already have in the description, or join the channel membership. And don't forget to claim your 15% off Chapters Tea and Coffee. The book and these videos are best enjoyed with a lovely beverage on hand. And until next time, always remember, Are The Entwives, they shall come again.